Here's a man who has seen around the corners at every beat over the last 40 years of this business and has a vision for where this business, way before a lot of people see it. Him now being able to utilize what we have built in our flywheel, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, because I got Vince McMahon, a visionary that sees around corners. I got Dana White and what we've built. That's pretty unstoppable.
So you wanted him to stay?
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God.
Did he have to convince you to stay?
Not that much.
Would you have been
I
content?
love what I do. I've loved building WWE all my life. It's my passion. And to have an opportunity to have it grow like this, an exponential standpoint, is like, can't beat better than that.
It's an interesting plot twist because not a lot of people saw this coming. In fact, your own CEO, Nick Khan, told our David Faber just back in February, quote, Vince has declared to the board, to me, to other upper management, he is 100% open to a transaction where he's not included in the company moving forward.
Sure.
You were ready to walk away?
Absolutely.
I wasn't going to let him.
It's here. You hear what I'm telling you? In my mind, I created it. I built you. I created it. And it's real. Don't you understand?
Hello everyone, welcome to Struggle Session. I'm of course your host, Leslie III. I got two special guests, huge guests. First up, Josie Riesman joins me to talk about her New York Times best-selling book, Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America. It was one of my favorite books of last year, besides of course Kill the Rich by Jack Allison and Kate Shapiro. But it's a great book, fascinating book, and so much bigger than professional wrestling. You don't care about wrestling, this episode's still going to be fascinating to you. Just like Josie's book. But I had the benefit of being able to talk with Josie about some of the things that happened after the book. Some of the recent trials and tribulations that have occurred within the McMahon family corporation. The big business deals. The big merger with UFC. The content deals with Disney and Fox. The new $5 billion deal with Netflix. We talk about all of it with a big focus, of course, on the fact that Vince McMahon is no longer with the company. This media empire that he didn't found, but built up certainly, turned it into a public company and a multi-billion-dollar operation. And within a year of this huge merger that made Vince McMahon richer than he'd ever been, he was out of the company. We talk about that. And as I said, you don't have to care about wrestling to find this story interesting. But for the wrestling fans, for the real sickos out there, that's what the second half is for. That's what the bonus half is for. And I got a guest I know you're going to love. I love him personally. He's a great guy. Bryan Quinby of the mega hit podcast Guys returns to Struggle Session. And I know y'all love hearing Bryan talk as much as I do, so I called Bryan up to get his thoughts on some recent happenings in the other big American wrestling company, AEW. Specifically, I really wanted to get his thoughts on the airing of the CM Punk and Jungle Boy footage. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry, that's on the bonus half, which you can get at sesh.show. The links to Patreon, Substack, they're all there. Or you can just send me an email, thestrugglesession@gmail.com, if you want that bonus episode without paying for it. I don't want anybody to be cut out of content just because of finances. Now, of course, if you do subscribe, you get access to all of our bonus content, many movie commentaries, including several I did with Bryan on some of the greatest action movies of the 80s, as well as the Bugmain Star Wars commentaries, which I have to say I'm so grateful because so many people messaged me or talked to me about it this past weekend, it being May the 4th. Shout out to everyone who told me that they love those commentaries, that they love hearing Bugmain. Those are some of my favorite episodes of Struggle Session as well. Thank you so much for, it's been a very, very hard year for me personally, but hearing you all still enjoying the show, going back and listening to some of our old stuff, it really brightens my day, and I really appreciate that. So anyway, that's enough preamble. Stay safe, stay masked up like Bugmain. Enjoy the show. All right, so Josie, welcome to Struggle Session. And first thing I gotta ask you is, I don't know, maybe you need to talk to your publisher or something, but is it possible to get DLC for a print book? Because this story, every time I've talked about it on my show, I think I'm done with it, and it keeps adding on. I'm doing another. I did the episode maybe a year ago or two ago, and it's completely changed, flipped over twice. I guess it's fitting for the story of Vince McMahon, of professional wrestling, and of the sports entertainment.
I don't think you have to call it that anymore. The person who was really enforcing that is no longer in power, but do as you will.
Yes, so much has happened, and the most recent development is that it looks like maybe for real this time, we're talking stake through the heart, the sun's coming up, and there's maybe no way out of the castle, at least for now. Vince McMahon has stepped down once again from his role within WWE. What was WWE? Now it's TKO. We'll get into it because there's lots of twists and turns, and lots of money,
twists and turns, yes.
and lots of money involved. In fact, $5 billion just this week. Man, I don't even know where to start. Maybe you can help me out here. But Vince McMahon may be done for good because of the story that we've been covering since it happened about the NDA scandal, where Vince McMahon initially, as it was initially reported, it was found that he had paid out $3 million to an employee to cover up what was then thought to be essentially quid pro quo sexual harassment on a repeated scale. He had hired a woman into the company, and we do know her name. It is public now, Janelle Grant. Mm-hmm. And she's bravely come forward and sued him over this. But at the time, we didn't know her name. But the leak came out that Vince McMahon was under internal investigation by the WWE board for paying this woman $3 million to cover up a relationship that sexual relationship that they had while she was an employee, and essentially cover up the fact that she was really hired to have sexual relationship with Vince McMahon. And then he later, and this was in the original reporting, passed her off onto another executive, John Laurinaitis, who left the company shortly after this initial reporting in, folks, June of 2022. That's how long this story has been going on.
Yeah.
But during that, but that initial story, Vince McMahon stepped down, retired from WWE. He said it was time to take my retirement. They gave him a wonderful send-off. His daughter Stephanie came out there, led a thank you Vince chant on national TV.
Yep.
Bizarrely so, and she ended up taking over his spot in the company for a few months, but then she ended up quietly, strangely, leaving WWE entirely. And there's just been so many twists and turns. It's like a real life succession. I don't even know. It's hard where to begin, but the latest development after Vince McMahon about a year ago pushed his way back into power by using the impending sale of WWE, because he still, even though he had left the company, he maintained a majority of the voting power as far as shares go. And he said, I'm not going to sell the company. I'm not going to sign any new TV deals unless I am installed back into power. That happened. the company was sold. Not sold, merged with UFC to form a new company called TKO, headed by Ari Emanuel. Ari Emanuel says, not only did I want McMahon back, I insisted that Vince McMahon come back. He is on CNBC next to Vince McMahon after this NDA scandal, which grew from there. God, I'm even skipping over the part that the initial $3 million NDA installment that payment that we heard about was not the only bombshell. Then there was about $9 million more payments, NDAs that were keeping secret sexual harassment as well as sexual assault of a WWE talent. And that was kind of the thing that pushed Vince immediately to retire then. But fast forward to January of last year, he's back in the company. And then in April, when the sale goes down with TKO, Ari Emanuel sits on CNBC with Vince McMahon for the first time he's been in public since this scandal came down. And he said, Vince is my guy. I insisted he be here. I insisted that he become the chairman of TKO, even though at the very least he has paid off $12 million in NDA settlements for what at the very least was quid pro quo sexual harassment, but also included allegations of sexual assault. Whew.
You haven't even gotten to the lawsuit last week.
Haven't even gotten to the law. It's so much. All right, but I've been buzzing on it. Is there anything you want to add before I continue the summary?
No, I mean there's plenty I could add, but keep going. I'm curious to hear what you make of the lawsuit.
I opened the show with the clip of Ari on CNBC, and it's just him and Vince in there,
right? And
they're just celebrating. They're just so happy and proud of this deal. And
talking to a reporter who was represented by Ari Emanuel's firm as after the segment where they were doing the interview, the correspondent sort of wraps up the package and says, "Full disclosure, I'm represented by," and it said that a bunch of other people at CNBC were also represented by that firm. So I feel like that's an important thing to note for the CNBC interview, is that it was a friendly crowd. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and friendly crowd, and CNBC in WWE at the time had, I think, a $1.5 billion deal with it
for Peacock and for everything.
Yeah, and they also have like $1 billion deal with Fox for SmackDown, and they have a deal with Disney through their A&E networks. I think they have a $500 million deal there for WWE produced documentaries that were mostly about how Vince McMahon is a genius. So like there's a Sunday night block, I think, where it's just 3 hours of Vince McMahon produced documentaries about how Vince McMahon was the smartest man in the world. And so that's why, and this is why I think that's part of why this story has been dangling for so long, is because most of the major media outlets either have deals with WWE or, as we found out, were interested in doing deals with WWE. I was able to find out actually that Real Sports was planning on doing a report on Vince McMahon.
Yeah, I'd heard about that as well. Keep going,
And then you hear, a few months later that Real Sports is, by HBO.
Right.
Warner Bros. You start hearing these rumors, which did not pan out, but they were pretty firm rumors that Warner Brothers WB Discovery was interested in doing a deal for WWE Raw. Are the two connected? That the story?
Who knows? But it certainly
that the story
makes you
got
wonder.
killed at some point because the story didn't come out. It got killed at some point. Who knows?
Who knows?
But yes, that was April of 2023. Vince McMahon is the chairman of TKO. If you don't care about wrestling, there's not much between now and then that happened. Vince McMahon at one point was more in creative control of WWE, and then he ended up being pushed out for one reason or another. It was never really clarified why. Maybe it had something to do with this. January 23rd, it's announced that WWE has signed a $5 billion with a B dollar deal with Netflix to air WWE Raw, just one show $5 billion for $5 billion options, 10 years,
Right.
$500 million a year. First 5 years, after the first 5 years, it's an option, but that's a lot of money. That's
It is a lot
big
of money,
deal.
yes. And it's a big publicity play for Netflix. This is not some small acquisition in terms of, Netflix has spent lots of money and then not paid any attention to things it bought in the past. But this is part of their big play for live television because it's going to be a live Monday night stream. And that's something that's very important to Netflix. So, yeah, we'll keep going, but they're in a tight spot now, too.
There was a big bidding war, apparently, for the WWE, for the rights deal for Raw with several networks interested. But this is the thing that I've always questioned. I really want your thoughts on this. And to pause the timeline for a second. Vince McMahon, at that point, had 4 public allegations of sexual assault already made against him. Yeah. At that point, January 23rd. He's the chairman of TKO Group, which is over WWE.
Yeah.
So this is who they were willing to get in bed with, Netflix,
Were they, though? I mean, I'm going to stop you there because I think a big misconception is the idea that Endeavor, which is Ari Emanuel's holding company, knew what they were getting into when they got into bed with Vince McMahon. I don't think they did. I think that's their fault, but I think they did not know what they were getting into because they don't know wrestling. Like, it's one thing to have a major entertainment company where the person at the top has been accused of sexual assault. People like Ari Emanuel meet guys like that every day and do deals with them. What I think happened here was they thought they had just another case of a company with an embattled but charismatic leader, when in fact what they were dealing with was the cesspit that is the wrestling industry, which is its own unique kind of abusive ecosystem. It's different from the boardrooms of, various other people who've been accused of sexual assault in a prominent way. Wrestling has its own code, and it's not a code that really lines up with the laws of the United States. They knew a lot, but I don't know that they knew I could be completely wrong, but my guess is they wouldn't have gotten into bed with Vince if they had had the sense that you and I have of what the wrestling industry is. Let me put it that way. That's what I'm trying to say.
And they did. I think if they knew all the details that were in this lawsuit specifically, they would change their mind.
I think so too. But these details in this lawsuit, although they're shocking, it's like if you knew how wrestling operates and how other alleged crimes and proven crimes have been committed within wrestling and the volume of those crimes, then you might suspect something like this would be possible. But it seems like the people at Endeavor just figured this was another PR storm they could weather. And who knows,
yes,
maybe
definitely.
It still will be. But it's really, I think people are not ready for what wrestling actually is on its underbelly.
Ari, I could have saved you a bunch of money. Just listen to the struggle session. We've been covering the story for a while. So up to this point where not much has happened. Vince has gone in and out of power at WWE creatively, but he's still at TKO. And I'm hearing on the street that he's in the room with these companies negotiating these TV deals. Yeah. So that's why I said this is, at this point, the Wall Street Journal had already talked about multiple allegations of sexual assault for Vince.
Me too. I wrote in New York Magazine. I was the one who got corroboration of Rita Chatterton's claims that Vince McMahon raped her in 1986. These allegations go way back.
Way back. There could have been earlier due diligence done. Just a couple of days after that $500 million Netflix deal, more details come out about that initial story about what was thought to be quid pro quo sexual harassment with a staffer that was paid for that. She is now suing Vince McMahon for sex trafficking her. And and the details are absolutely horrific,
hair-raising,
terrible.
Yeah, the details of the accusations are very hard to get through, but that's sort of what makes them seem so credible to so many people is They have such detail and have screenshots of text messages from Vince, everything.
I don't want to get into the various details of it, but I do want to say the specific details of the abuse line up with with the allegations of abuse, like you just mentioned, going back to 86?
86 was when that alleged rape happened. Rita didn't come forward until 1992. But, look, let me put it this way. When I got that corroboration from the wrestler Mario Mancini, his recollection was telling Rita, don't go anywhere near Vince because bad things will happen, which implies that even as of when the alleged rape occurred, there was already a reputation going around that Vince was somebody that you didn't want to be alone in a room with if you were a woman.
Yes, absolutely. So we've talked about the various cases of WWE where it's, the Jimmy Snuka case where Jimmy Snuka allegedly beat, and I do want to say, in case Jerry McDevitt, Vince McMahon's lawyer is listening, everything here is allegedly, and this is a comedy podcast. All of it is alleged, but Jimmy Snuka allegedly beat his girlfriend to death, and Vince McMahon was able to get him out of it. You actually, in your book, you were the first time that I read about the time where Jim Neidhart allegedly beat up a flight attendant
on a flight to Pennsylvania, which led to Jerry McDevitt getting hired in the first place because he was at a Pennsylvania law firm and Vince needed somebody local to help Jim Neidhart out of the allegations that he'd assaulted the flight attendant. And Jerry McDevitt's been his personal lawyer ever since.
And Jerry McDevitt, I have, an excellent lawyer, I assume, because who will go after wins a lot of cases. Does he deserve to win any of them? I don't think so. I mean, WWE, he is part of, I think people do not know how WWE operates, because they have Jerry McDevitt, who's their personal pit bull who will sue, he's gone after journalists, he's gone after victims of alleged sexual assault, including children, literally children. And WWE also has their own private security firm that they don't really like to talk about. There's been this massive apparatus around WWE, and you highlight a lot of the political apparatus that they have, how they've been plugged into local Connecticut politics for, decades at this point.
Their first foray into politics was bullying the local government of South Yarmouth, Massachusetts, into allowing them to escape some regulations for the Coliseum, the Cape Cod Coliseum, which they owned. And that was their first foray. It wasn't exactly party politics, but it was very specifically an effort to get hundreds of people to show up at this meeting of the town council and intimidate the council into voting the way that the McMahons wanted. And that was just the beginning. That's early 80s. And then by the mid to late 80s, they were pushing deregulation of wrestling across the country. And that was a really pivotal moment for a lot of reasons. But yeah, that was the beginning of them being very politically connected at a lot of different levels.
And we'll pick up the politics back. I know this is getting a little bit discursive, but I do want to, but there's so much to cover.
There's a lot to cover.
There's just too damn much to cover sometimes. But going back to this, the lawsuit. So this lawsuit reveals that things are much worse than what most people heard or thought or expected. And the reason for the lawsuit, and again, this is something that lines up with Vince's history, is that he, even after he made this woman suffered horrific abuse. And by the way, the lawsuit details how many people in the WWE knew some part of this or had to know some part of this, right, including top executives, including top stars. But the fact that after all this abuse and the humiliation, because he would share the abusive things he did to her with other people, even low-level staffs, he said he would share news of her with, that he forced her to take. So just really terrible stuff. $3 million settlement, he pays her $1 million and then stops.
Yep.
he's
well, I mean, the timing is, it seems to be that he stopped because he got caught for everything else, including,
yes.
you know, it was in 2022. It seems likely that he stopped the payments, allegedly, if these allegations are true, as a result of the fact that he got caught for it and many other things in 2022.
The reason he got in trouble is just because he didn't declare them. He said he was supposed to declare the payments as part of...
Right.
And by the way, that is still an open federal investigation.
It is, yes, very much so.
And even though that the area Manuel still insisted he be the chairman of TKO while he was under federal investigation.
Yeah.
But whatever. But cover this in your book. But when you look at Vince's history of paying people what he owes them, he will often find an excuse not to do it. He will welch on
Absolutely
anything.
True. Absolutely
even
true.
though even though he's richer than he's ever dreamed of, I think he's worth like $3.5 billion.
Yeah, it's a
with
lot
a B
of money.
dollars. Now, this piddling payment for $3 million for this woman who not only suffered all this abuse, if he did this, he allegedly had to know that she had proof of all of this, and that several other people in the company knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he still was too much of a cheap bastard to pay her off.
Look, there is so much that we don't know about this case. And even I, you know, who am claiming to be the expert here, there's a lot I don't know because Vince has really become as isolated, lonely, and paranoid as he's ever been. I mean, very few people are in touch with him. You have all kinds of people in the wrestling world who were sources that I could call and ask, you know, what's Vince been up to lately, or who's talking to Vince. Nobody knows anymore. I mean, he doesn't really have any contacts in the wrestling world who feel comfortable talking to him, as far as I know. It's really wild. Like, he used to be the most visible man in wrestling if you were in wrestling, because he was, you know, at every show practically and involved
shaking
in
everyone's hand,
involved in every creative decision. And now it's like, I mean, what's fascinating is they still don't really have a party line yet about all this. You know, I mean, they don't really have the official, this is what TKO Holdings Incorporated believes about Vince McMahon.
They haven't even issued like a denial. Vince McMahon issued a personal
denial. All they did was cut ties with him, briefly make a statement saying he's not working there anymore, and then former wrestler and now chief creative officer, so C-suite executive, Triple H, Paul Levesque.
And Vince McMahon's son-in-law.
And Vince McMahon's son-in-law on top of all that. I was thinking just in terms of corporate duties, but yes, Triple H comes out and at a press conference after the Royal Rumble gives this very limp, weird answer. Not even a prepared statement. It came out and gave a prepared statement, but it was just about the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, it was about how successful the Royal Rumble was.
Which it wasn't even. People didn't even really like this Rumble.
And I should mention WWE. I feel like I'm neglecting it. WWE is also named in this lawsuit, like the company.
Sure. Well, because if these allegations are true, if even a fraction of them are true, a lot of people at the company knew what was going on, or at least had some suspicion that something untoward was happening.
And I do want to say, for the record, from the people I talked to, I haven't talked to them about this specific case, but for the people I've talked to about how WWE operates and other things, they told me, I'm talking about people who've worked in the company, writers,
sure.
like all of the McMahons are very hands-on, very close. It's very tight-knit. The idea that someone like Triple H, Paul Levesque, the current chief creative officer, or Stephanie McMahon, or, you know, any of the top people would not know about this sort of stuff on some level is ludicrous. It's preposterous. That's not how they operate.
No.
That's not how they run their company. They are not hands-off people. They are people who, if someone on the website fucks up, you might get screamed at by someone whose last name is McMahon.
Yep.
Okay? So
That's
like
exactly
that is
right.
how they work.
No, I don't see, if these allegations are true, if even part of them are proven to be true, a lot of people are going to be implicated. I mean, that's the thing that really beggars imagination, is what you said earlier about how could they have gone into this deal, they being Endeavor, knowing what they knew. And although I would contend that they didn't know as much as they should have known, even with what they knew, it really does beggar the imagination how you could end up thinking this wasn't going to end up being a huge problem that blows up in your face, because it was never going to be just Vince who was implicated in these accusations. Because Vince by his own admission, like, eats, sleeps, and breathes, or when he was in charge at least, he ate, slept, and breathed the office. He was just there all the time. He had a gym. He was working late hours. So it's like, when was he going to have alleged sexual crimes happen if it's not going to at least be partially on work time and with work people hearing about it? It's crazy. But this is the business that Ari Emanuel decided to buy and merge with UFC. I don't know. It makes you wonder about a lot of C-suite executives at a lot of companies and how much they read about the things they're doing.
Well, I should mention that UFC, Dana White.
Yeah, right. Well, there you go. That's a whole other story.
Yeah, Dana White is on video slapping his wife from, I think, maybe 2 years ago as well. Maybe it was around, and he had a press conference saying, he was basically like, well, what do you expect me to do? Punish myself? I would just be punishing my fighters. Yeah. So I'm not going to punish myself. This embarrassment of it being out is enough. That's the type of people.
That's the kind of people you're dealing with in combat sports,
who they put
man.
with Vince already. Like, it's just so bizarre. And as a fan, a lifelong fan of professional wrestling, I just wish things could. I feel like in a lot of ways things could have been so different if it weren't for Vince McMahon. And I wonder what the future looks like with WWE. Possibly is more successful on paper than ever, but may not have a single McMahon working there by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the odds are very good that Ari Emanuel will clean house, at least to a certain extent. Here was the thing about Triple H's response. It wasn't that he was, denying the truth. It's not like a corporate suit is going to care about whether a mouthpiece is telling the press the truth. It was that he presented this very lame set of answers that weren't even the standard script for what you're supposed to do when you're doing a corporate denial.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. Like, there was, I think, even maybe was it the New York Daily News or TMZ? One of these rags are like pointing out how bad and tone deaf the answers are. Think how low the standards are.
I know,
but pro wrestling press conference, and they still were disappointed.
Absolutely. I mean, my friend Brandon Thurston, the great reporter from WrestleNomics, asked a great question. He asked a direct question. He just said, "Have you read the lawsuit?" And Triple H said, "I did not.
Which is
crazy. It had been 48 hours since the lawsuit was filed, 24 hours since Vince had left. And Triple H's response was, "I did not read the lawsuit. I'm trying to focus on the positives," which is just, I can't imagine that somebody like Ari Emanuel was happy with a response like that.
And in case, Paul ever does read it, you may want to take a look at corporate officer number 1, who is named specifically as residing on the 4th floor, which is where his office was, and is said to have definitely 100% known what was going on with Janelle Grant. So you mentioning the cleaning house part, that is interesting to me, because it's like, because WWE used to be a family business.
Yeah, it was a family business for a long time. It was founded by Vince's father and grandfather.
And, all the peccadillos, all that negative history, they've been able to kind of cover it up, shine it up, polish it up in the past 10 years, gloss it up. They've tried to make themselves almost like the Disney of pro wrestling. They've been
like a venerable media brand that you can do business with,
But they kept McMahon on.
Yeah.
And they kept the McMahons on. And the McMahons are just completely fucked up people. And now it's time, I think, to talk about the politics, because now with Vince McMahon retired, there's still an incredibly powerful McMahon out there, Linda McMahon,
Linda,
who is part of Trump's inner circle. I think she's head of maybe his main pack. She used to be his, I think, secretary.
She was the director of small business administration under
small
Trump.
Business, yeah,
and then was the head of the largest pro-Trump super PAC. Yeah, she's a very powerful political operator. She ran for Senate twice, and although she lost both times, she demonstrated that she could spend an insane amount of money, which is what really makes you a popular person in political circles. So she has become a really expert money person for the Republican Party and for Trump in particular at various points.
Her story in itself is wild. She was essentially like a child bride for Vince McMahon. He met her.
They met when she was 13 and he was 16, and they sort of gloss over what might have happened before they got married a few years later when she was of age.
And then she's working in the WWE offices, and when Vince McMahon in '92 is possibly about to, was it in '92 when she became the face of the company as the president? I believe
that was right. I'll be fully honest, some of the dates there are blurry for me right now.
But around that time, she kind of becomes the fake president of the company because Vince might go to jail, and then she ends up becoming eventually like an on-camera personality, even though she has no personality. She's a terrible actress, but they play act, and this, we have to mention this, they play act a lot of these bizarre psychosexual
scenarios, including ones repeatedly where Vince has to, I don't know why I said has to, where the character of Mr. McMahon, as played by Vince McMahon, degrades employees. I mean, I shouldn't even say employees. In the fiction of the world, they're his employees. In the real world, they're independent contractors who aren't even technically employees. But he has repeatedly put Linda and Stephanie and Shane and himself into these stories that involve sexual degradation of women.
Yeah, sexual assault. Like, he had his wife sexually assaulted on camera. As part of the story, by his former rival and Eric Bischoff. And Eric Bischoff talks about how weird it was because Vince was off camera directing it and saying, no, really, get her. Like,
really get in there. I know.
Really dark stuff.
Very dark stuff. And that's not even counting Stephanie McMahon, 3 times in the course of a calendar year being fictionally sexually assaulted on television. Very weird. And that was her first year of appearing at all. So anyway, we're getting off track, but we're getting off track.
It's getting too deep, but the point I was trying to make is that Vince McMahon, a lot of the stuff that's in this lawsuit, that's in the 4 other allegations, a lot of it he did on TV as well. And I think you mentioned in your book, like, by making it part of the character. Up until that point, it's kind of protected him from because people think it's just a character, or they just say, "Oh, of course."
Yeah, or like, "Oh, well, we know that." I mean, there's a brain hack that Vince figured out a long time before Trump even did, which is if you just get out there and say with a semi-ironic wink, "I'm a liar and a criminal," then you can lie and commit crimes, and people go, "Well, I guess he already warned me." I mean, there's this weird brain fart that the human brain has when presented with someone who does what they said they were going to do, even if that thing they did was harmful or evil or repellent. You just sort of go, well, I guess they know it, so there's nothing I can do to shame them about it, and I'm powerless, so I don't know. And you just sort of stand down. You think it's water off a duck's back at that point. But it feels like something has changed this time. I mean, he doesn't have the financial power he had. He's very rich, but he doesn't have the financial stake in the company. So I think he was really open to an attack this time. And it seems to have taken him down to a certain extent.
Yeah, I should mention, though, that the bylaws, I think, of the company said that Vince McMahon would be chairman
until
for
his
life.
death. Yeah, for life.
Literally for life.
Right.
So he essentially had to step down, and we should mention he stepped down only after Slim Jim pulled their sponsorship of WWE. Those little meaty sticks, those people who make those meaty sticks are the only company maybe to actually have a little bit of a moral backbone. With
it was very
WWE.
odd. I was not expecting something that snaps as easily as a Slim Jim to end up being the thing with the spine. But, it was really, I think that probably spooked the corporate suits. I can't imagine it didn't. They were like, well, one of them did. And Slim Jim, we joke about the product, but it's part of it's a big corporation. I'm sure they have a very long-standing partnership with WWE. That must have terrified them.
Yeah, it's been going on for decades. So if Slim Jim goes, Vince
then
has
you've
to
lost
go.
everybody, right? I don't know, but they don't have a strategy yet that they've revealed to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's worth mentioning before we've been going a bit long, but I do want to mention it's like what WWE is essentially is like 30, 40 years of Vince's fucking id presented on national TV straight from the source.
Correct.
It is him.
Yes.
Like it's his idea of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
It's his idea for and of wrestlers. Everyone who works there has a little Vince in their brain.
Absolutely.
If they didn't, they would have. They
wouldn't
fired.
succeed there. Exactly.
Yes.
You have to have the little Vince telling you preemptively, this is what Vince will be mad about, and then you don't do it. It's self-censorship 9 times out of 10.
But what I really want to kind of get on, and this is kind of the thesis of your book. What does it do to people, a country, to have to have so much of our culture be filtered through the mind of a monster
When it comes to Vince, what I tend to think is his biggest influence was his bending of reality, his ability to bend and blend fact and fiction to a point where the human mind cannot do anything other than pay attention to the parts he wants you to pay attention to and not pay attention to the parts that he's not drawing attention to, which is, as of when Vince was pioneering what I have come to call neo-kayfabe, which is that blending of reality, a lot has happened where people now use that tactic. And I'm not saying it was all Vince, but I think you can never underestimate the degree to which Vince's influence was being put upon millennial kids. I mean, millennials grew up, and Xers to a certain extent too, grew up at these two peak periods of wrestling's influence. And I think it gave a lot of us a sense of, let me put it this way. When the essence of neo-kayfabe was that at the height of his powers on television, Vince McMahon, as a character, Mr. McMahon, would sort of get up there and just do exactly what we have ended up seeing so many other people, including Vince McMahon, do on the national stage and the global stage. And the whole time they're telling you, this is all fake. This is all fake. But maybe there's a real thing in there that you want to pay attention to and believe in. Maybe something in here is real. What if this little bit was real? What if that little bit was real? And it sends you into this spiral where you're just your brain is trying to categorize what's true or false, which is a natural impulse. And all you can do is pay attention while that's happening. We see this with Trump over and over again. You see something so unbelievable or outrageous that you go, was that real? Could he have meant that? And you're spending so much time trying to figure that out that you're paying attention. The essence of neo-kayfabe, I remember what I was going to say. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But was when he was feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin being the hero of this story, everyone hated Mr. McMahon. You were really pissed off at him all the time. And what they would say was like, do you hate Mr. McMahon? So do we. Buy the latest Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt to show how much you hate Vince McMahon. But who's making the money off of that t-shirt? You know, that's how he operated. He managed to figure out a way where even if you hate him, he wins. And I'm wondering if maybe this is sort of the end of that free ride. I don't know. It's too early to tell.
Far, far too early to tell. It's early days. I wish Ms. Grant the best of luck on her lawsuit. And I really wish, I hope the mainstream media pays a little bit more attention to the story, because everyone has said that there's more out there. There are more victims. There are people who did not get settlements or NDAs out there.
I can tell you, just without obviously coming close to even naming details, there are people I've spoken to who have accusations that they were not comfortable going on the record with. But I've heard a lot more than just what I was able to report. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's more there. It's the same company. It's the same letters, WWE. All these major media conglomerates have big deals with them. There should be just a little bit of accountability. Thank you so much for joining me today. Where can people find you in your book?
You can find me. Find my book. That's the most important thing. That's at ringmasterthebook.com. And please go to my website to see more about me. That's josie.zone, josie.zone.
What a great conversation with Josie. I'm so appreciative of her coming on. Again, Ringmaster is a great book. Just one brief update. The corporate officers, and in the lawsuit, initially they were just called corporate officer number 1, 2, 3. We know who those people are now. Corporate officer number 1 was current WWE president Nick Khan. Corporate officer number 2 was now former WWE COO. He resigned just a couple of weeks ago, Brad Bloom. And corporate officer number 3 was named as Vince McMahon's daughter, Stephanie McMahon. But now, moving on to the second half of our show, Bryan Quinby is going to join me to talk about some AEW. If you want to hear the full second half, all you got to do, sign up, patreon.com/struggle session, strugglesession.substack.com, or just head to sesh.show. There's links there. Again, thanks to everyone who listens to us on Spreaker, on Spotify, on YouTube. Thank you to anyone who tells their friends about the show. And again, if you can't afford the bonus episodes and you want to listen to one, just send me an email to strugglesession@gmail.com. We'll hook you up. Anyway, here's Bryan. So Bryan, we've talked about a lot of infamous moments in wrestling history. Maybe not all. We've talked about some of the really dark stuff and some of the sillier stuff. And I feel like today we had a chance to see one of those infamous moments in real time happen last night when Tony Khan decided. And again, this part of the show, this is for the real wrestling sickos, okay? We're going to dive in deep. All right, so it's not for the casuals. You can stop listening now. We're going to get deep into what happened last night on AEW Dynamite, because I feel like it felt like back in the Bryan, I forget, when did you start watching wrestling?
Well, I started in 2014 again, but I watched it during the Attitude Era.
You watched it during the Attitude. So you were there for the downfall of WCW. You were down for the moment I think back to was when Vince Russo, the writer of the show, decided to give himself the world title on national TV. That's one of the moments where I was like, this is fucking stupid and indefensible. Why am I watching this? And I feel like almost AEW has gotten to that point. I don't know what your take on it is, but what did you think about the angle last night where they showed footage of an actual backstage fight between one CM Punk and Jungle Boy Jack Perry, Luke Perry's son, which is one of the funnier things about it. There was a backstage brawl. It's been in the news for months. It's been talked about for months. But we never saw the footage until tonight when CM Punk is already outside of the company, back in WWE, no longer with AEW. And they decided to air the footage now, seemingly out of spite, I believe is.
I totally. One thing I'll say is I get the impulse. It might have been not. I mean, I don't know. For me, it's fun. It was funny.
It is fun. It is funny.
I'm not like, I can't lose either way. I think